Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey with your host, Dave Westcott. The Entrepreneurial Journey is a weekly podcast that streams live every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific on Dave's YouTube channel and LinkedIn profile. Now here's Dave with this week's episode.
Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott, and I've got with me special guest Jason Kruger, partner at Citrin Cooperman and founder of Signature Analytics. Jason, good morning.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super glad that you're here. It was fun chatting with you before the show was getting going, getting to know you a little bit, and getting to know a little bit about life and family and business and hanging out in the Pacific Northwest. And congratulations on all of the success that you've had in business. As we get going here, you know, obviously you're in the financial space. You've been in it for quite a while. What drove you to get into finance from day one? What did you see? Why did you take that route? Just give us a little background on the why.
Yeah. So my background, my degree in college from the University of Arizona was in accounting and finance, and I knew that at that time that I wanted to get into business. Accounting, doesn't sound like the most exciting thing in the world, but I also knew, that accounting, or my belief is that accounting is the foundation of business from the bottom up. Meaning, if you understand the numbers and you can read financial statements and financial information, that is kind of the foundation that everything is built off of. I knew that experience and that background would serve me well getting into the business world. So from there, I actually went to some of the larger national public accounting firms, Moss Adams, who's big in the Seattle area, actually, and just merged with Baker Tilly. They're based out of Seattle, actually, which is where you are. And then I moved over to Deloitte, which is one of the big four accounting firms. And so was able to really kind of sharpen my trade over about a 9 to 10 year period in that space, really learning a lot about businesses, a lot about finance, accounting, all different types of industries, and really just use that to build my skill set that ultimately allowed me to start my own business in 2008, which was, Signature Analytics. And that firm was an outsourced accounting and CFO advisory firm for companies in the small and mid-market space. And so to me, I always had that entrepreneurial itch, I guess, but I also knew that it was important to take my time, build my skill set, build my credibility in the marketplace before I made that leap. So that's cool. A little bit about how I got there. Yeah.
No, that's a great bio, man. I love that. I love how you did that. I also love how you took this enormous risk in like 2008, which is one of the worst years ever for, I think, business on planet Earth. In 2008, you say, "Hey, I'm diving in and I'm starting my own business." I got to know, man, what did you see in 2008 that said, "Hey, the world is crashing. Let's start a business"?
Yeah. I was young and dumb. I don't know. A lot of ignorance, I think, is part of it. I knew that I wanted to make this leap into entrepreneurship. At the time, the timing was right. I had built a background and a resume that I felt I could leverage to move into this next space. I was newly married. speaking of, we were talking about in-laws before. I'm sure my father-in-law thought, like, what the heck is this guy doing? He just got married to my daughter, and now he quits his good job, and he's gonna go start some company. I was newly married. We didn't have kids. I thought, hey, I have a runway here to get going, where we can suffer, but still have the stability of my wife having a job, so we can still live a little bit. But the reality too is, in my years at Deloitte and Moss Adams, I worked with a lot of companies that where they looked at accounting and finance almost as a necessary evil, meaning I have to pay my bills, I got to invoice my clients, I got to collect my cash, and then I got to do my taxes at the end of the year. And as the companies grow, they start to feel the pain points of not having their pulse on their financial information. They want bank financing. They want to bring in investors. They have to manage cash flows. When you're smaller, you can manage it in your head, but as you grow, especially in certain industries like manufacturing, it becomes very challenging to manage cash flow, and you can grow yourself out of a business even if you are growing. And so being able to bring that skill set to companies in the mid-market, I felt there was a lot of value to. And the way we did that, it was in a flexible, scalable way that made sense, that was really at the right cost point for these companies. And so we really were able to bring a good value prop. Now, I literally left Deloitte, and then 2 days later, the economy falls apart and everything's happening. But the reality is, I didn't have any employees at the time, so it was just me. And there was probably less stress at that point than there was in the good days when we had 75 employees, when you got to make payroll every 2 weeks, and you got to manage profitability and manage business, all that kind of stuff. So
isn't that the truth? So it's interesting. I've always wanted to have on the show somebody who did work like you've done. So it's filled a great gap for me here this morning, and it's been kind of cool. Now, let me just make sure I got this right. So Signature Analytics focuses on accounting. So basically you're doing some like if a company wants to have their bookkeeping done, then your firm is basically stepping in and saying, yeah, we'll spend 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, whatever. We're going to basically act as your accounting team. We're going to drive in and do that. You did advisory work, and then you had CFO advisory work, / part-time CFO type work that's happening at the firm. Did I get that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically. I mean, we look at it, and we're doing the same thing with Citrin Cooperman. So Citrin Cooperman is a full-service CPA firm. So think of tax, audit, but we also provide. I'm in the function that provides these same services that we were just talking about, the Signature Analytics did, which is why we were able to slide in very well. But we look at it, a company, and most of our clients they've gotten to a point of a certain level of success, and they're trying to get to that next level, and they're starting to feel the pain points where maybe they have a bookkeeper, but they've outgrown the sophistication of that bookkeeper. And so they need somebody or a team that can come in and provide that financial and accounting leadership. So in some cases, we take over all of accounting. We're doing it all. We're paying the bills, we're invoicing, we're closing the books, we're producing monthly financial statements. We're sitting down with the client to walk through that. In most cases, the client is actually just lacks the sophistication, and they've outgrown their current team. And so what we do is we assess the environment, the accounting and financial environment. We assess their team. We say, hey, what's working, what's not? You have good people, they just don't have the direction and support to be successful. So let's understand let's define roles and responsibilities of your team. Let's bring in and layer in the leadership from our team. We can fill in the gaps. Everything from bank recs to closing the books to producing monthly financials, and let's work collaboratively with your team. And so, and we do that on a fractional basis. So we bring in, let's call it 2 to 3, up to 5 individuals that become part of our client's team. They just don't happen to be there every day. They're not working 40 hours a week for them, but that's not the need, because they have these gaps that need to be filled. And in most cases, it's the leadership side on the accounting and making sure the processes are in place to produce good financials every month at a certain time that you can trust and make decisions off of. And that is the critical piece. And then obviously things like managing cash flow and so on. So that's kind of how we approach things. And at Citrin Cooperman, we're doing the same thing with our clients. We just now have more support and than we had before, and we have a national presence now.
I love it. That fractional work is good work. And, I've worked with, over the years, I've worked with a couple of fractional CFOs and fractional accounting firms, whether they can bring in a controller or they bring in somebody for AP or AR. It's nice, right? It fills gaps. It helps you, keep your team building and growing your team. And so that's issue. But I do have a couple of questions around it. And I'm wondering, when you come in to a small to mid-sized business, which I'm guessing is where you do a lot of work, right? I'm guessing that's a big space. I could be completely wrong, but when you come into that and you look at where they're at with accounting, looking at where they're at with cash flow, looking at where you're going through the books, you're doing some analysis. Is there a common denominator problem that you see in small business that's like, man, most companies miss here? This is low-hanging fruit that we can clean up. We can make this better. We can make this easier. We can make this more cross-functional within the organization. Whatever it might be. Is there sort of a miss that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, I would say in small or mid-sized businesses, it always starts with cash flow. Our clients typically are, let's call it 5 million to 100 million in size. So we actually, a lot of our clients are 20, 30, 40, 50, $60 million companies. And when you get to that size, managing the cash flows of your business is critical. And so an example of that would be manufacturing firm. An easy example would be manufacturing. One, if you have inventory, you have to put money out, put money out the door to buy the inventory. So you're already out cash there. Then you have to incur costs to manufacture the product. Then you ultimately sell the product, but then you don't get paid for 30 days after that. So you have this huge cash flow cycle that is very challenging to manage. And what that tends to be in any business is managing cash flows, and so that business owner can sleep at night, right? It's like, hey, what keeps you up at night? Oh man, I got to make payroll next week, right? Yeah. And so a lot of companies are, every week they're struggling. Hey, do we have enough for payroll next week? Do we have enough for payroll later in the week? And that becomes the biggest, what I would say, initial hurdle. And then beyond that, it's really the mindset of of getting in a cycle of closing the books every single month and leveraging good financial information that I, as a business owner, can trust to make decisions to achieve the goals I have in the future. And being set up and structured that way gives you so many opportunities moving forward, because I also hear we get a lot of clients that, they're trying to get bank financing, but the first thing the bank's going to ask for is, let me see your financials, right? And if they hit print on QuickBooks and it's a mess, the bank's going to say, okay, well, come back to us when you clean this up. Or, you never want to let somebody else interpret your financials. You want to give them a package and tell the story to them. And that's a critical piece as well. And so I think, really, as it relates to business owners, it always, in our space that you and I work with a lot, it always revolves around cash flow. And then it revolves around what they're missing in most cases is, yes, maybe they're reconciling the bank accounts, but are they actually able to get good financial reporting that they can see, okay, I can see what my margins are, and now I can make a decision on how to improve those margins. And that's that next step and that next evolution and the maturity of a business owner to be able to get beyond 5 million and 10 million upwards to, 20, 30, 40 million. And that's where a lot of business owners, they start to run in circles. They get to that 5 million mark and they're like, yeah, I got here. We grew super fast. And why can't I get beyond that? It's because they don't have their pulse on the financial side of their business, but they also haven't built out the infrastructure to support that growth in the right way as well.
So 5 million is kind of a stopgap that you see in business that, you can get there, you can pound through it, you can grow through it, but outside of 5 million, you've really got to be on point with your financial infrastructure. That's kind of the advice that I hear you saying.
That tends to be, I mean, it depends on the industry, but that tends to be, like you said, willpower can get people a long way. You can push through it, but at some point, things become overwhelming because there's so many moving parts in a business, where you can't manage cash in your head anymore. And you can't manage the financial side in your head. You can't manage the business in your head. And so you need to start building those processes, not only in finance and accounting, but operationally, HR, sales and marketing, all aspects to take that business to the next level.
Yeah, I think that's critical. One of the misses that I would say that I see in the cash flow management in the service-based business world is, let's say that you've got some kind of construction company or, whatever they're doing. And, their sales, they're watching their sales and they're so excited about their sales. And they say, man, in January, we want to close $1 million in revenue. And they close that $1 million in revenue. And they have this idea that their business is just, man, we're going so great. We're taking over the world. We're going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And what they don't see a lot of times is that, okay, they're going to get that down payment and they think, well, we got that $1 million, but our down payment on that $1 million is only $500,000. And then how many weeks does it take to start the job? Well, maybe the job starts a month out, so they don't see any cash flow for a month. And then, the job's going to take, 3 months because it's $500,000 and, they're not probably going to have any payments in there. Maybe they will. And then they've got to get that client to pay and the terms are net 30. And so by the time they look at it, they don't have any income for 6 months, and all of a sudden in the middle they're running short on cash, and they're running short on cash because they don't understand the true life cycle of cash. And I think it's not just cash flow in my mind, but it's the life cycle of when the money comes in, and it's understanding, does your business even have the infrastructure to handle a $500,000 job or $1 million job or a $35,000 job? Because you have to be able to carry those expenses from the time that you start the job to the timeout, to the suppliers, to the vendor payments, and you have to be able to understand all of those cost-based milestones along the way to get you to the end. And that's where I think you see a lot of people in service-based and a lot of people, even in bigger business in service-based side, they run short on cash flow as they're getting to the end of that job, and then they're fighting tooth and nail. They cut quality, they cut costs, they're trying to get there.
Yeah.
Do you see that in business? And if you do, what is a solution that you put in place to help them walk through that scenario?
Yeah, well, yeah, we see that all the time. And the other error that is made a lot of times is when they get that $1 million, as you mentioned up front, they count that as revenue, and all of a sudden their books look, like, hey, look how profitable we are because we have $1 million of revenue. And then when they show their financials, they have no expense associated with that because they haven't done any of the work, right? So the reality is, you're misleading yourself and whoever's looking at your financials because you're booking that revenue. And it also becomes very choppy to record your revenues and your expenses like that. And so from a financial reporting perspective, really, we want to record the revenue when the work is done so you can match the revenue and expense and understand the margins and have it evened out over the year so you can really see the true performance of what your business is. And so that way you can say, okay, hey, great, we got $1 million. That's not revenue. So it's a mindset change of, hey, yeah, great, we have it, but we have to now perform on that. And so we don't see that. We can't pat ourselves on the back yet because it's not showing as profit. It's on the balance sheet as effectively a deposit or a customer advance. And so now let's perform and let's manage the business and the profitability in that way. On the cash flow side, that's where, when pretty much every client that we work with, the first thing that we put in place is some sort of cash flow forecasting process where, the industry standard would be a 13-week cash flow. 13 weeks is selected because that's basically 1/4 of time. And once you get out, start forecasting beyond 13 weeks, it gets, a little hazier or a little more cloudy. But really, it's at a minimum. Let's look at this on a weekly basis, and let's start mapping out what your expectations are of cash outflows over the next 13 weeks, and what your expectations are of cash inflows. The easy ones are, hey, we got payroll every 2 weeks. We have our rent expense. We have other stuff. But if we have to buy supplies, if we have to buy materials, what's the timing of that? And then what's also the timing of any cash inflows that we might have with, coming in from either new jobs or other jobs that we have going on at the same time. And so it's not going to be exact, but it should give you a lot of comfort so you can sleep at night knowing, okay, I know when I should be making these payments. I know when, or have a good feeling of when cash is coming in the door. I know that if cash comes in the door a week later, I can move these payments back a week, but I still have to pay these. So it gives the business owner a lot more, I guess it relieves a lot of anxiety and more confidence in how they can run their business. So if you don't do anything else, start, build out a process to be able to forecast your cash on a weekly basis over the next, call it, quarter. And sometimes we'll do it longer. We've had a client several years ago where we were doing it every single day. That's how tight they were. I mean, it was like, okay, what do we got today? What do we have to pay today? What's coming in today? What's coming in tomorrow? But at least if you don't have that and you're trying to manage in your head, that's where things can get very, risky, I would say.
Yeah, they do get very risky. That's great information, and that's a great share. I want to go back to you're an entrepreneur, you're building the business. It's 2008, 2015, 16. Time is going off the clock. You're selling a fractional service and obviously doing other financial services work along the way. But I'd love to know how you approach the sale. What sort of things do you do when you're selling a new client, when you're talking to a new client on why they need a fractional service, right? Like, it always seems to me, just from a business standpoint, I guess just from an interesting standpoint, it always seems like it seems like a tougher sale than normal. And maybe that could be completely wrong, but it seems like, man, you've got to come in and you've got to say, well, you don't have a CFO, or a CFO is going to tell you where you need to go and how you run your business. And, it's going to cost you, I've seen costs anywhere between, $185 and $550 an hour for these type of services based on the level of the person, the blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And they look at that and they think to myself, oh my God, this is so expensive.
Yeah.
How do you sell that? What does that sales process look like as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, so we always look at it from a overall solution-based approach. So it's not like, the advantage that we have is we have a team. So we're not, what ends up happening a lot of times is a client or a company will bring in a CFO, and that CFO they might be doing high-level advisory support, but they also might be doing bank recs when the books aren't in place. And so now they're paying $500 an hour to do bank recs, right? And that doesn't make any sense at all. And so for us, let's making sure you have the right people doing the right thing at the right time, and then also leveraging the existing team. A lot of times, our clients, they've outgrown their current team. So here, the scenario usually is one of two things. One is they've had the same bookkeeper and the same AR and AP person. They're 10 million now, and they've had the same 3 people since they were 2 or 3 million. Yep. And now they're being asked to do all these things, and they're being asked to do things above their pay grade, above their skill set. They're struggling, they're stressed. And so the company's like, hey, and they can't get good financials. They can't manage cash flow very well. They're trying to get bank financing. They're feeling the pain point. And so their options are, well, a lot of people say, well, I'll hire a CFO and that'll solve everything, or I'll hire a controller and that'll solve everything. And so the first step for us is to educate them on, how do you define the role of the CFO? How do you define the role of the controller? Because a lot of small business owners think a CFO, they in their mind, they're thinking CFO, but the roles that they're thinking is really a controller. And a controller is really to manage the accounting, make sure that there's oversight of the day-to-day processes, closing the books, producing monthly financials. That's all controller work. That's not a CFO. And so then they try to pay a CFO. They try to get a CFO, but they want to pay a controller salary, right? And so there's a mismatch. So the first part is really educating them on where are the challenges, where are the gaps, and what do you truly need here? And then you start talking to them, you say, hey, you don't actually need, and a CFO is going to be, a good CFO is going to easily be over 200 grand a year, or more. A good controller is going to start at probably, depending on where you are, at least, probably 150 and upwards. So the question is then, do you need one person in one role, and do you need to be paying them 150 to 200 grand a year? Or do you really need that? Does that role, a controller role, do you only really need that role for 30 to 40 hours a month? And maybe we can break that down, and you could get a controller for 40 hours a month. And then we can bring in a senior accountant that can help close the books at a lower cost point, for 20 hours a month. And we can start to break that apart, because smaller companies, they don't need necessarily that full-time role, and they're feeling the pain point. So they do need to make a decision. They need to bring on additional support. And their options are, I can hire one person in one role for 150 to 200 grand a year, or I can bring in a consultant, an outsourced individual, right, that might be able to support me. Or I can bring in like a Citrin Cooperman, and we can really define truly what the needs are at each level. We can fill in the gaps, make sure you have the leadership, you have the leadership, you have that CFO or the controller, that $200,000 plus controller and or CFO, but you can leverage their skill set when you need it without having to have them full time and pay for that full time. So they really get the value of the high talent, quality talent, at a cost point, that either equal or hopefully less, but really focuses on where their needs are. And that's, typically how we will approach the engagement.
I love that. So in my mind, a controller is, telling us where we've been, but that CFO is telling us where we are going and how we're going to get there. Like, that's kind of the way that I break that down. And when I look at that, if I just kind of, break down what you said, if I'm looking for a good CFO, I'm paying somewhere around $20,000 a month in salary, roughly, plus taxes, burden, etc. If I'm putting in a controller, I'm looking somewhere in the, $15K plus burden, etc. But if I bring in, maybe a CFO or, maybe a controller, what I've seen in the past is a controller at, maybe 40 hours a month is going to cost me somewhere between 12 and 15,000 bucks a month, basically between that. And I don't have the person on my payroll. I don't have to worry about benefits. I don't have to worry about letting them go. They're an expert. They can come in, they can hunt and kill the problems. If you've got a controller, maybe you're bringing them in for, 9 to 13 or something, or, but you're able to reduce some of these costs, but you don't have the burden, you don't have the payroll taxes, you don't have all of those things that kind of go into it. You don't have to manage that person. And so as you're growing and scaling, it's that win-win until you're ready to bring in that right person that, you want to really manage your books and your industry. Did I encapsulate that the way you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we know when our model is stretched, and we'll be the first one to recommend, hey, it's time to bring in and hire somebody at a full-time basis at this particular level. And where we come in is, like I said before, it's not just, hey, here's a controller for 40 hours a month. It's, hey, here's a controller for 40 hours. And then we can leverage, what you you would have, as a business owner, have the controller doing the bank recs and closing the books. Hey, we'll leverage a staff or a lower level person to do that. And so now we're breaking that apart and creating more cost efficiencies. And at the same time, we're creating better oversight, review, better processes as well. So you can really break that apart, get better service, better quality at a cost point that is hopefully at a minimum equal to or less than, how you would structure it by hiring one full-time employee.
I love it. That's awesome. All right. I'm going to jump somewhere totally different on you here. But one of the things I've been thinking about is there is tons of IRS tax code.
Okay. Yep.
That is out there, right? And there is, a small amount of tax code, and I'm not a tax code expert, but while I've got you here, there's a small amount of tax code that says, these are the penalties and, these are the things that are going to happen if you don't operate the right way. And, we're going to drive a stake through your heart. But the majority of this thing, like 90%, I'm just going to guess, 90% of this tax code is basically ways in which your business can leverage benefits, cost reductions, loopholes, things like that can help you grow. And I think it kind of comes down to this idea, this is just my idea, that the government wants you to do certain things, and as long as you play ball with the government, then you're going to get these incentives, these tax breaks, these bonuses, these things that are going to help you grow your business. Mm-hmm. When you guys look at business and you look at tax code, are you looking at things that can be advantageous for that small to mid-sized business in that world of tax code? And how do you see that as a benefit to business? Because the majority of what's written out there seems to be in the benefit of the business owner if you play ball the way they want you to play ball. Am I accurate in that? Am I off in that? Do you guys utilize any of that? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely incentives out there for businesses at the federal level and at the state level, depending on the states that you're in. And I have to caveat this. My background is not in tax, although I know enough to be dangerous, and I work with our tax team all the time. So, and as a business owner, having taken advantage of certain things, it's critical. But the first thing is to have, to be able to take advantage of any tax related opportunities is one, have a good financial foundation, right? Like you got to have an understanding, you got to have good financials in place so that you have the opportunity to take advantage of things. If your stuff is if your process to do taxes every year is, you use QuickBooks, everything's a mess, and you just throw it over to your tax advisor. They try to clean it up the best they can, and then they file your taxes. You're probably not getting a lot of value or out of your tax advisor, one, and you're probably not taking advantage of things within the tax code that you can benefit from as well. So just some things that we were able to take advantage of as we were a growing company in the state of California. It's called California Competes. So they incentivize and give tax breaks to companies that are growing, and if you're able to show that growth, employee growth, what they're looking for is how do I build, California wants to build, and have businesses grow. They want more employees, right? They want businesses to hire more people. So they incentivize businesses to, with tax breaks, if they're able to grow their business. And so that's one thing that obviously they're not going to give it to you unless you apply for it or know about it. But that's one thing that we took advantage of a number of years ago now, when we were growing company. The second one that is most people are probably taking advantage of is it really depends on how you structure your business, whether you're a C corp, an LLC, an S corp, allows you to take advantage of different tax scenarios differently. There's the with the pass through for pass through companies, the tax break associated with pass through companies, meaning the pass through is like an LLC or an S corp. For an LLC or an S corp, there's more tax advantages associated with the tax law that came into place the first time that Trump was in office. And now the second time, with the quote unquote big beautiful bill, there was some changes especially in research and development, and also capitalization of, like, when you buy equipment or buy fixed assets, and how you can leverage those costs to reduce your taxable income throughout the year. Or on an annual basis. So there were some changes that were actually advantageous to business owners and companies in how they are able to leverage the tax code to be able to reduce their taxable income on an annual basis. So those things are critical. And what I find is that most tax advisors, unless you're a top 10% client of theirs, they're not going to be overly proactive, even if they say they are. So depending on who your tax advisor is, it's important as a business owner to bring these up to your tax advisor to say, hey, what are some opportunities beyond just doing my taxes? Like, am I set up appropriately from an entity perspective to take advantage of this? Should I be buying equipment at the end of the year? Well, now we're in part of the new year, but if I buy equipment in 2026, that will reduce my taxable income. But planning those things, like, how much cash do I have? Can I buy equipment, reduce my taxable income, and ultimately leverage that to grow my business? So there's a number of ways and advantages that, if you're proactive with your tax advisor, you can certainly take advantage of.
I love that. I love it. Now, it's cool. You grew Signature Analytics from zero, right? This idea of, hey, we're married, and we got a little bit of runway before we have kids and the world starts taking off. My wife has a job, to 15 million in revenue, and only 1% of businesses, from the research that I've done, ever cross the $10 million mark. So congratulations on being a 1%er. That's pretty exciting stuff. That's a great job. Now you go through the sale, and a lot of times people, they say, oh man, the sale was tough, or I wish I would have done it, or man, it was the greatest thing ever. There's a lot of different feedback either way on the sale. As anybody is listening to the show and they're going through a sale, is there anything out there that you would say, hey, watch out for this, or I didn't see this coming, or I didn't know? I mean, obviously, you're still with Citrin Cooperman, you're happy. I mean, it sounds like you're happy. It sounds like life is going well and they're a great company. But is there anything, as you went through that process, that you would say to the prospective person going through an acquisition, hey, pay attention to this, watch out for this, this could be a blind spot that they could potentially run into?
Yeah, I think, well, one is, don't be desperate to sell, right? Because you're going to get the lowest. You're going to be selling at a low point. I think when a business owner, regardless if they want to sell now, 5 years, 10 years, or never, I think the mindset should always be, what do I need to do to always be maximizing the value of my business, so that if something does come up, I have maximum value and I can sell. And so instead of doing nothing and then saying, hey, I want to sell in the next 3 to 4 months, can you help me? Well, then you're kind of putting lipstick on a pig. You're trying to there's not a lot you can do, right?
Right.
But if you have that mindset from the early stages of your business, do some research on your business. Hey, how are companies like mine valued? And you might find that they're valued, let's say, companies are selling between a 4 and 8 times EBITDA, and EBITDA is basically your net income, and you add back depreciation and interest and taxes and stuff. So, well, if I'm a $10 million company and I have a $2 million EBITDA, if I'm selling at 4 times EBITDA, that's $8 million. If I'm selling at 8 times, that's 16 million. So I might have the same revenue as somebody else in my industry, and one might sell for twice as much as the other. Well, which company do you want to be, right? I want to be the one that gets the 8 time. I want to be set up to maximize the how my business is sold. And so those are things that need to be done over a period of time in how you build the infrastructure, understanding the market, understanding the environment, understanding your margins, all of those things. A lot of that comes to the financial side of the business and understanding that financially. So that's number one, is starting early. When you get to the sale process, again, the first thing they're going to ask for is your financials, and it's very important that you showing some level of sophistication is important. What ends up happening, or what I've seen a lot of times, is you'll get an LOI, or you might talk to a potential buyer and you get a letter of intent, and it says, hey, I'm going to buy your business for $10 million. And you get excited, you feel great. Oh yeah, we're selling for $10 million, right? Well, then the next step is they say, well, we need to do some due diligence. We've looked at your high level numbers. We'll buy it for $10 million. But in due diligence, they're looking for risk, right? What are there any areas that that they can find that add risk to the deal? And risk will push the deal price down. So now you go through due diligence and they say, hey, you know what? We found this, this, and this. Because of that, we're actually only going to give you 8 million. And now as a business owner, you're stuck, right? You're like, in your mind, you've already thought about the vacation you're going to take. You already thought about buying the new house or the car. You already thought about, how, oh man, all the years of blood, sweat, and tears are finally over. And you're now in this position where they're offering you 8 million instead of 10. And most business owners, they take it because in their mind is already, now they do it and they're just disappointed. They didn't get what they thought they were going to get. They didn't, they're not, they just, it just doesn't work out, and it turns out to not be a great deal, or it's structured in a way where they weren't expecting. And most of that is because of risk and not having good financial information that the business owner, that the buyer can trust. Identifying other areas of potential risk, like maybe client concentration, or lack of infrastructure within the business. So all of those things are important to be looking at in advance before you get to that point. And so unfortunately, I see that a lot, which is, hey, I want to sell. Okay, great. I got this letter for 10 million, but now at the end of the day, I got 8 million out of it. And I'm just kind of like, that's kind of that, that's a bummer, because you do deserve 10 if you set yourself up effectively and appropriately getting up to that point.
And the disappointing thing in that whole thing is that when you get to 8, you now have to pay this monstrous tax bill most of the time. And it knocks down to, 4 or 6, 5.5 or 6, it's not even truly 8, right? And then you got to, maybe pay some employees, and you got some performance base, and I don't know. They're going to nickel and dime you. It can be rough. But that's a good breakdown. And I like what you said. It really comes down to basically where you started the call, which was, hey, I was at the University of Arizona, and I got into finance because it's the foundation of business. And so it really kind of comes full circle. The foundation of business is what this thing is all about, accounting. And if your accounting structure is clean from day one, and you invest in the right partners and the right people to help you along the way, you're going to have good, clean financials that allow you to get bank loans, that allow you to sell your business at the dollars you want. Like, it all comes down to finances at the end of the day. It's not the thing that we should be dreading. It's not the evil vampire hiding in the closet or underneath the bed. It's the thing that we should be embracing, the bright, shiny star on the hill, right? Because that's really what's going to drive the success of our business as we move forward. And it sounds like you've done just a great job. You have definitely a deep understanding of the finances. Talk a little bit about your role now at Citrin Cooperman. What are you doing? Are you out riding mountain bikes all day, or are you in the office grinding, or what does the world look like?
Yeah. So the Citrin Cooperman is based out of New York. I'm actually heading to New York next week. for a few meetings. But really, I'm a partner now at Citrin Cooperman, and Citrin Cooperman is broken out between what they call core, their core services, which is tax, so business and personal tax, audit. So companies like if you get a bank loan, the bank's going to require you to have audited financial statements if it's over a certain amount, and then other advisory services. And so the outsourced accounting services is kind of what we slid into. And so I'm a big part of the outsourced accounting, supporting and continuing to drive the success of our outsourced accounting services within the company. I think we have within Citrin Cooperman, I believe we're probably somewhere around 300 individuals in that space. We're about the company or the firm as a whole is about 35 to 4,000 employees or individuals that are working within the firm as a whole. So we're probably our group is probably less than 10% of total revenue at this point, but it's also the fastest growing group in the firm. So there's a lot of excitement around that. But my goal is really to help to meet with people like yourself. I like to educate the entrepreneurs, the business community. I like to talk to business owners about the challenges that they have, and as it relates to the accounting and financial environment of their businesses, and make sure that our clients are supported effectively. So I'm kind of out there, meeting with business owners. I'm also working with our team to make sure that our clients are supported effectively.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're having some fun, and it's pretty cool because it sounds like you, by Citrin Cooperman acquiring Signature Analytics, they added about 25% to that book of business by bringing that acquisition in, and they've got you in there working it. Yep. So that just building that reduces the turnover that can happen in an acquisition. So it seems like that's really good. As you're working or you're giving advice to any first-time entrepreneurs, what would you share with anybody getting started in business or running through business now? What would that advice look like?
Yeah, I would say know all aspects of your business. So a lot of business owners, let's say for myself, for example, I got in, I started a business, and I knew my trade. My trade was accounting, right? I can do the work, I can perform the services, or if it's most business owners, they're an expert in the business that they create in how to maybe the operational side of things, right? But as a business owner, you have to also understand the other aspects of the business, which is HR, right? How do I hire employees, benefits? How do I create a good culture within my organization? Sales and marketing, accounting and finance. And the error that I see a lot of times is the business owner says, "Hey, I'm going to get started. I'm going to bring in the business. I'm going to do the work. And then when I get to a certain point, I'm going to hire a salesperson, and they're going to just grow my business, and things are going to be amazing." Well, in most cases, I find that doesn't work out because they hire a salesperson and they just say, "Go sell my business," and there's no oversight, there's no support, and they're just kind of crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. And I don't like to run a business by just crossing my fingers and hoping for the best. So how do I make sure that I understand the sales process? How do I understand marketing? And, I want to hire the experts, but I have to be able to manage and drive those individuals, hold them accountable, and make sure that there's metrics that I'm evaluating their success off of. Otherwise, you're just crossing your fingers. You get 6 months down the road, the salesperson hasn't sold anything, and you're like, "Oh man, I just invested $100,000 in this person. They're telling me they have a potential pipeline. Do I keep going? Do I not?" And you get into that rut of you just put a bunch of money out the door. You're not holding that person accountable. You're just hoping they go sell. And so the advice I have is hire the experts, but really understand, dig into and start to understand sales and marketing, dig into and start to understand how to read financial information and financial statements, and so that you can understand the metrics of your business and ultimately improve those metrics to create a healthier, more valuable business over time. So that would be the biggest thing for me is don't just think, I'll just hire a bookkeeper and they'll do the books. I'll just hire a salesperson and they'll do that. If you really want to get to that next level and be successful, you gotta become an expert in sales and marketing. You gotta learn how to really read financial statements and make decisions off of that. And that's probably the most critical thing.
First of all, I love everything that you said. Second of all, I had a panic shot of anxiety run through my body. I don't know if it's even left yet, because all that is so true, right? Like, that's really what happens. I mean, that's really what happens to people in business. They have this great idea, but they don't know, and they're just hoping on a wing and a prayer that the sales guy is going to close the deal to keep the doors open for one more week so that they can keep their dream and their hope of being free when they're really locked in a cage and they're about to die. Right. Kind of thing. So I felt that anxiety on the call, and it rattled me to my core. How can someone get in touch with your team? I mean, obviously this is, in my mind, one of the number one things that anybody can do to really support their business, to really grow their business, to put their business in the best place. Even if they're not running a full package, just having the resource of a team that, has advisory services, that has, tax and compliance on the other side of the armchair. They've got, fractional CFO capabilities. They got fractional AP, AR. I mean, all of those things you're able to implement into somebody's business, and businesses need this every day. I think one of the hardest positions to hire for and then manage in any company are the accounting positions, because a lot of times, in my mind, the owners, the founders, the entrepreneurs don't have the financial acumen to do what you just said with the salespeople. They don't know how to hold the finance team accountable. They don't know how to read the financial reports. And so they're looking at something and they're getting advice, and they don't really know if it's right or wrong. So working with a partner like yourself is something that I can see helps to accelerate the growth and the success of a business. That's my little plug for you. Whether it's right or wrong, that's how I'm rolling with it this morning.
Yeah.
And how can someone get in touch with you guys at your firm? What's the best way to do that? I mean, obviously, the website, Citrin Cooperman, easy. But what's a good way to connect for somebody who's listening to the call today?
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to business owners. I'm happy to talk to anyone. If I can provide them a nugget or some advice or support, I'm happy to do that. If not, I probably know somebody that can, either within our firm or outside of our firm, that I'd be happy to introduce. An easy way to reach out to me would be through LinkedIn. Jason Kruger. I'm at Citrin Cooperman. That's Citrin with a C, so Citrin Cooperman is the company. Or reach out over email. The letter J Kruger. That's Kruger at citrincooperman.com, and I'll respond and love to chat and see what your business is like. And again, like I said, I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. I've worked with hundreds of businesses, thousands probably. And if I can provide any nuggets of support, I'm more than happy to do that.
I love it. You're just really looking to be a good partner. That's what I hear. And you know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two.
Yeah.
Right?
Good and the bad.
That's right. The good and the bad. Well, listen, it's been awesome having you on the show. I got one final question before we bring this thing in for a landing. We've got a big billboard on the side of the freeway, the side of the road. It's completely blank. What's one word, sentence, phrase that you want to leave with the world today?
Yeah, I mean, if it's related to business, I would say, know your business. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is don't just know your product or your service. Know your business, know the sales and marketing, know the accounting and finance, know the HR and the culture of the business. And that's one of the biggest challenges I see from business owners is, like we were just talking about, which is, I'm a business owner. I know this. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to hire all these people to do all this other stuff. 99, more than 9 times out of 10, that is not going to be a successful combination.
I love it. That's absolutely fantastic advice. This has been the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott. We are back 9:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Tuesday. If you like this show, give us a like, give us a share, drop your comments into the comment box. This has been an absolutely outstanding hour. We went a little bit over time, but it was, time flew off the clock. It was so intriguing. It was such a great conversation. Jason, it was awesome having you on the show, man. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. I got pages of notes. I'm smarter. Everybody in the audience is smarter. It was a win for all. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.